After Pigs, I watched the 1976 science fiction movie Embryo, starring Rock Hudson, Barbara Carrera, Ann Sheeding, and Roddy McDowall. The film is about a scientist who keeps a fetus alive in a laboratory, with the scientist giving it artificial growth inhibitors, causing the fetus to grow into a fully grown woman within a few days. The scientist becomes infatuated with her, and there's an accident leading to the climax of the film. I thought this was an interesting science fiction film, with it coming out 1 year before Star Wars in 1977. I thought the film was interesting, and I think if you like science fiction, then you'll probably like this one. So check it out if you're interested. After Embryo, I had watched another science fiction horror film, with that being Dr. Butcher, MD from 1980, also known as Zombie Holocaust. The film is about a group of scientists that find an island where there are both cannibals and zombies being made. Of course, I didn't watch this film in the best quality since I know that there's like a restored version on Blu-ray, but I thought the film was decent. I have heard other reviewers, like I believe it was on Red Letter Media, where they were throwing shade at this movie. I thought it was okay. Of course, this was at the time when Zombie had come out from Lucio Fulci in 1979, and there was also the Dawn of the Dead movies, which came out around that time too. It seems like in the early 80s that zombie movies were pretty commonplace. I thought it was decent. In addition to watching Dr. Butcher MD, I also watched the 1973 pseudo-horror film Dr. Tarr's Torture Dungeon, also known as The Mansion of Madness, which I believe is based off of an Edgar Allan Poe story. And the film is about a group of maniacs in an insane asylum that take it over and basically rule it. There's all sorts of weird set pieces and costumes and designs in this film. It's just very weird and avant-garde, and it's definitely a product of its time, but it's just really fascinating to watch it. I certainly got a kick out of it just seeing the insane imagery and just the scenarios that these characters get themselves into, so definitely check it out if you're interested in it. After that, I watched the 1997 action film Double Team, starring Dennis Rodman and Jean-Claude Van Damme. Of course, this is a film about two special agents who are hired by the government to stop a man from starting World War III, who's played by Mickey Rourke. And this film was very over the top with its action set pieces and its just ridiculous premise. I have to say that there are moments in the film where I was just kind of like, oh my goodness, this is really getting out of hand, but it was really enjoyable, and it's a fun 90s action movie, and you can't really go wrong with it. Jean-Claude Van Damme had done a majority of films like that at the time, and Dennis Rodman was, of course, popular at the time for his basketball career. It's just all around a great film. The next film I watched after Double Team was the 2012 science fiction action movie Chronicle, starring Dane DeHaan from Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets, and Michael Jordan. The film is directed by Josh Trank, who did the newer Fantastic Four movie from a few years ago. Of course, I think there's a director's cut version of this film, but I watched the theatrical cut. The film is about a group of friends that get superpowers from an alien artifact that they find in the woods, and their lives sort of unravel after that, with Dane DeHaan becoming the antagonist of the film with his powers growing, and it gets so out of hand that I think there's a really cool set piece where they have it reminds me of the movie Hancock, where they have a fight near the Space Needle, and of course, they're suspended in air, and they're flying like, in the movie Hancock with Will Smith, and I just thought it was a really interesting and underrated science fiction film from, back in the day. After Chronicle, I watched the 1971 Western Big Jake, starring John Wayne. The film is about a man who is wanting gold from John Wayne's character, and he gets some help from his sons, who he is trying to show them the ways of the cowboy. Of course, trying to show them how to, ride horses and, shoot guns and stuff that, of course, at the time you would have had to have known to survive. And I thought it was a very enjoyable Western from that time period. I'd say it's probably one of John Wayne's better films from his later repertoire, but I do enjoy a John Wayne Western movie every now and then, and I thought this is a good one. After watching Big Jake, I watched what is considered one of the most important Western movies of all time, with that being The Magnificent Seven from 1960, starring Yul Brynner, James Coburn, Steve McQueen, and Charles Bronson. The film was apparently inspired by the Akira Kurosawa film Seven Samurai. The film is about a group of gunfighters that stand up for a small town that won't defend themselves from a group of outlaws, and they try to teach them how to fight, as well as stand up for them. Which, a fun fact about the film that inspired this, it was also used for the 1998 Pixar film A Bug's Life, with the film having the same theme of the ants not defending themselves from the grasshoppers, and of course that translates over to this film with the Mexicans in this small town that won't defend themselves, and the outlaws, encroaching on them. Yeah, I have to admit, this is one of the most important, probably one of the most important westerns ever made. I had mentioned previously I had seen Once Upon a Time in the West, which is another one. And I know there was a remake of this movie a few years ago with Chris Pratt and Denzel Washington, and I haven't seen it yet, but I'm sure it doesn't hold up as good as this one. But yeah, this is definitely one that you need to see. After The Magnificent Seven, I watched the 1975 science fiction sports action movie Rollerball, starring James Caan. Of course, there was a remake of the film in 2002 with LL Cool J and Rebecca Romijn. But of course, I'm talking about the original Rollerball, with it being a science fiction dystopian movie about a brutal sport called Rollerball, which the film reminds me a lot of the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, The Running Man from 1987. I think that they're very similar in terms of both being science fiction movies that also involve some sort of sport. I think it's very unique. Of course, there's not usually a whole lot of science fiction movies that involve some sort of sports like that. There is that other movie that it reminds me of, Free Jack, with Emilio Estevez, with that being a racing movie, or at least the beginning half of the movie was about racing. Yeah, it's a unique film from that time period. Yeah, the remake didn't do so good, if you can imagine. After Rollerball, I watched the 2004 documentary Murderball, which is about the sport of quadriplegic rugby. And I thought it was an interesting documentary, seeing just how many struggles that the players had to go through being quadriplegic, and also the squabbles with their coach that they were having. I thought it was a very interesting documentary from that time. I think it had won several awards when it came out, and I don't know, it's a documentary you just don't really hear about anymore, and I figured I'd bring it up, so check it out if that's your kind of thing. After Murderball, I watched the 1977 horror movie Kathy's Curse, a film that was infamously showcased on Red Letter Media back in the day. Of course, the film is about a girl who finds a cursed doll, and the doll gives her powers that interfere with her parents and the babysitter that is watching her. And it was an interesting horror film from, of course, I said 1977. There's a lot of cool effects in it that remind me of Sam Raimi's The Evil Dead from 1981. I thought that it held up pretty well for when it had come out. I don't know, if you're interested in that kind of thing, then you might like it. After Kathy's Curse, I watched the 2002 science fiction movie Deceived, starring Judd Nelson and Louis Gossett Jr. The film is essentially aimed at Christian audiences, with the intrigue of the film having to do with the characters discovering that the aliens that they've been trying to contact may in fact be God. This is of course translated into the film when certain characters get psychic abilities, and they're not sure where they're intercepting these messages from or where these powers are manifesting from, and that's an important aspect of the film for people who have never seen it. I thought it was decently well made and surprisingly violent for the audience that it's aimed at, and I thought it was decent for the premise. Of course, like I had mentioned, it's aimed towards Christian audiences, so certain people might not be inclined to enjoy the film as much as, say, those audiences, but I thought it was decent for the overall concept. After Deceived, I watched the 1976 sports action movie Rocky, starring Sylvester Stallone as Rocky Balboa, which of course has started off the Rocky film franchise. Of course, there's also characters in the movie played by Talia Shire, who is, we find out, is Rocky's wife, and her brother, who's played by Burt Young, who I believe passed away last year. The film features Rocky preparing for his first fight with Apollo Creed, who's played by Carl Weathers, and it's an all-round great film. It starred a whole franchise of successful Rocky movies, and I most certainly recommend it. After watching Rocky, I watched the 2016 drama teen movie A Million Hits, a film that was originally marketed with an anti-bullying message that was a box office flop. An interesting fact about the film is that the film had brought on the stunt choreographer for the movie Sin City from, I believe, 2005. The film is about a group of girls at a high school that are bullying people, and there's just one girl that they're bullying, and they get into a fight, and the video blows up on social media and goes viral, and the film kind of expands out from there. I might do a spotlight on it on my channel at some point, but I'm not really ready for that yet. Oh no, it was interesting because this is a movie that you just really don't hear about anymore. After watching A Million Hits, I watched the 1993 horror film The Dark Half, directed by a horror movie director George A. Romero, who had done Night of the Living Dead, and it's adapted from the Stephen King story of the same name. The film stars Timothy Hutton, who is a writer who's being pursued by a killer in one of his novels who wants to get revenge on him. The killer, of course, becomes real, and he is pursuing him. And the film is wonderfully gory with its over-the-top special effects and insane storytelling. I think it's highly underrated for it being a horror movie from the early 90s, and I think you definitely get a kick out of it. So I would recommend The Dark Half. After watching The Dark Half, I watched the 1994 action comedy movie 6 Days, 7 Nights, starring Anne Heche and Harrison Ford, directed by Robert Zemeckis. The film is about a woman from the big city who leaves her job to pursue an airplane pilot who is played by Harrison Ford. And after their plane is down during a torrential rainstorm, they become stranded on a tropical island where they're pursued by pirates and get into various misadventures. I thought it was a very enjoyable film from the mid-1990s. Of course, one of the pirates is played by Star Wars' own Tamora Morrison. I thought it was a very enjoyable product of its time, mid-90s rom-com. It kind of reminded me of the movie Joe versus the Volcano, which I believe was directed by Spielberg. I definitely would recommend 6 Days, 7 Nights. After 6 Days, 7 Nights, I watched the 2006 comedy movie The Weatherman, starring Nicolas Cage and Michael Caine. The film is about Nicolas Cage's character, who is a distraught weatherman who is having trouble with his family, who learns from his father how to be a better role model, and then he learns that there's something wrong with his father that veers off in a different direction. And I thought it was a very interesting movie, and certainly one of the more underrated films from Nicolas Cage's repertoire. So definitely check out The Weatherman. It is a funny film, as well as very dramatic. After watching The Weatherman, I watched the 2011 comedy Tim and Eric's Billion Dollar Movie, starring Tim Heidecker and Eric Warheim from Tim and Eric's awesome show Great Job. The movie stars, of course, Tim and Eric, as well as Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly, as well as some other actors like Robert Loggia, who plays the antagonist of the film. But essentially, the film is about Tim and Eric losing their jobs, and they get a job working at a mall, where they essentially have to clean up the mall and bring in business. And Will Ferrell is a businessman who is their supervisor. Oh, in addition to Will Forte, who is, I believe he runs like a sporting goods store. They get into all kinds of different hijinks, and I thought this film was very hysterical. There's very few movies that really, go for broke like this movie kind of does, and it's certainly in the spirit of their TV show that they had on Adult Swim, and I thought it was enjoyable. After Tim and Eric's Billion Dollar Movie, I watched the 1993 action comedy movie Top Dog, starring Chuck Norris. And I have to say that it's a very bland and forgettable movie that is very similar to other films that had come out around that time, like Turner and Hooch with Tom Hanks, as well as some other films that had come out around that era. Big dog movies were kind of popular back then with Beethoven, and later on we had Air Bud, and of course there's a million other, comedy movies with dogs in them. Yeah, I thought Top Dog was really forgettable, and I can't even remember maybe laughing like maybe once or twice in it. I think it was mostly just a vehicle for Chuck Norris, just having another film under his belt. After Top Dog, I watched the 2003 action comedy movie Bandits, starring Cate Blanchett, Bruce Willis, and Billy Bob Thornton. Of course, the film is about three bandits who are essentially doing bank robberies and odd jobs while doing various characters in disguises. I thought the film was pretty okay. I think it leans more into the action sort of, caper film genre than it does the comedy aspect of the film. But I thought it was overall a pretty good movie. Yeah, Bandits was, I think, worth a watch. And last but not least, I watched the 2001 comedy movie What's the Worst That Could Happen, starring Martin Lawrence, Danny DeVito, John Leguizamo, and Bernie Mac. The film is about a professional thief who gets his engagement ring stolen by a tycoon who's played by Danny DeVito, and he collaborates with John Leguizamo and Bernie Mac to steal back his engagement ring, as well as making a fortune along the way. I thought it was a decent comedy for the time, and it is a little bit forgettable, but other than that, I enjoyed it. And with that being said, these are all the movies that I watched in 2020. My name is Clayton, bringing you new content whenever possible. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next episode.